Welcome to Loaded and Rolling. I'm your host, Thomas Wasson. And for today, we're going to be talking a little bit about safety, compliance technology, some mergers and acquisitions, and a bunch more great stuff. We're going to be catching up with the folks at Fleetworthy. They recently had some news where they had acquired Hall. And Hall is a company that uses AI, helps out with safety and compliance. And so there's a lot of great stuff going on. And we're going to be speaking with Mike Precia. He's the Fleetworthy's president and chief strategy officer. Had the pleasure of catching up with Mike a while back. And so always good to get to catch up, see what they're up to. And so let's dive right in. Mike, absolute pleasure to have you back on the show. You guys been a little bit busy since I last got to speak with you, but for folks who are not as familiar about Fleetworthy and what y'all do, give us a little bit of background.
So at a high level, Fleetworthy works with carriers of all sizes, trying to help them maintain compliance around their drivers and assets. Think of us as building a moat around the carriers on a daily basis, so that when the government is checking, they can see that they're a compliant carrier, they're following the rules, and they're building a safe environment for their customers or for their drivers. Since then, as you mentioned, we were acquired by BestPass, which led us into having the largest tolling network in the industry. And then we recently acquired DriveWise, which added to that. Now we have the largest bypass network in the industry. And as you mentioned, we just recently acquired Hall.
And I really like how you guys have continued to develop your software suite. And so, from a strategy, it's building that moat. Talk about what Hall does and kind of give us a little bit of the backstory behind the acquisition. Was this one of the first forays into safety and compliance, or how does it kind of fit into the overall network?
Yeah, so we've take a strategy of we're going to either build it or buy it, when it comes to expanding our footprint from a technology perspective. But if we are going to buy it, we want to make sure we are talking to customer or companies that are like-minded. They take the mission of making our roads safer serious. They understand that anything we can do to create a safer experience for the commercial drivers out there on our highways, that's important. And at that level, Hall checked all those boxes. And then when we started really looking at what they were building, and how they were focusing on leveraging, you know, cutting edge, modern technology stack, leveraging AI and machine learning, we started realizing this would be a great company to add to our brand. I think in the past I've told you we take a three-legged stool approach when we work with our customers. So it's understanding the data that's coming out of the cab and all the other dispersed data sources. Make sure we got technology that can be kind of the meeting place for our customers and us to work together to build that moat that I mentioned. But the other piece is people, right? So we have a large client services team that becomes an extension of our customer safety departments. That's always going to be a very important part of our business. But hey, if we can apply AI and machine learning to make those people even more efficient, more effective, more professional, we're going to do those things. And that's where Hall fits really nicely.
And let's dive into that safety and compliance aspect. I think it's really cool getting to speak with freight technology companies and platforms. That does seem to be kind of the next space with AI, whether it's using the AI to figure out driving behaviors, creating scorecards. Before we talk about why it's such a big deal and some specifics, what was it kind of like in back? Literally feels like 2 or 3 years ago, because it felt like safety compliance was a very reactive kind of thing to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, we used to talk about years ago that there was this uneven kind of equation for carriers. The government was and the manufacturer were building trucks that were highly technically advanced, a lot of information coming out of the cab. But when you looked in the back offices of trucking companies, they were kind of behind. They were still using legacy systems, paper, spreadsheets, and things. So they're at a disadvantage of like, how do we consume all of that data that the government's using to decide whether we're running legally or whether we're compliant or safe. So we wanted to figure out ways to help them, right? Consume that data, give it to them in an actionable way so that they're making decisions that are correct, and building a safety environment that's going to get them through audits and avoid nuclear verdicts and those things. So as you can imagine, iteratively over time, it's harder and harder and harder for the carriers themselves to keep up technologically. So we want to be, championing that for them. And Hall just did a great job to build platforms that small owner operators up to the large carriers could use, leverage technology to stay ahead of all the changing regulations and all the hard things to keep your arms around in the industry.
I think y'all have some great experience because thinking of DriveWise and Best Pass, before I worked for a small fleet, it was always automated. There was, think of a US Express. There was like a routing and a fuel department that handled all of that. But for these fleets, even figuring out where you go, the tolls, paying for stuff, that's like a huge deal. So I guess for these fleets, these smaller fleets and medium sized fleets, it's almost like an extra added benefit of tacking on this compliance aspect because it could literally just be one person compared to like when I worked there was a team of like 5 people, and a thousands plus employees that their sole job was to deal with. They just don't have the firepower.
Exactly, and we try to, when we're talking to our customers, we say, hey, if we there's sometimes a separation between compliance and all the things that you need to do to run a compliant business and safety, which is the experience that you're trying to drive for your drivers to make sure they get home safely and make sure that you're helping them drive more efficiently and safer on the roads, right? So with the combination of these technologies and companies, we're kind of that intersection of compliance and safety. So not only can we help you build the moat with great practices around compliance, but now sending messaging into the cab, trying to help and alert drivers to things that are happening that can be problematic for them in front of them. We're doing a lot of things to holistically that we used to kind of try to do separately, and we think the benefit of that is our customers, right? So now they can see the results of all the compliance they're working on one hand result in a much better experience for their drivers, much better safety ratings, and ultimately getting more drivers home safely, which is ultimately our goal.
I like the AI talk about it as well because a lot of folks are concerned. Working in media, everyone tells me one day I'm replaced by a robot. But for safety and compliance folks, it's a really huge deal because when I used to manage fleets, the only time I dealt with a safety and compliance, unless I had a small fleet, was someone telling me I got to yell at this driver over something random. I didn't have the time to actually know what the heck they were doing half the time because you're so busy with all these other tasks. So, like, talk about some of this cool stuff that Hall's bringing to the table. Is it like driver scorecards, AI coaching? What are some of these things that are helping automate it? Because I don't think a lot of people realize that, we're almost flying blind for most of trucking's history unless, you got somebody calling the number on the back of your cab and complaining.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. So it starts with there's a lot of data that's in different repositories or systems, and how can you use technology to connect those things together to help the driver experience. So it's one thing to identify that maybe the driver's having some issues at some aspect of the way they drive. How do you thread that together efficiently so that you can get that person enrolled in online training, make sure that they pass that training, make sure that the problems where the places where they're deficient, you're fixing, communicating that there's a problem, fixing it immediately, and then tracking and being able to prove that that was done. So those are the gaps that we'll use technology to kind of thread things together to make the experience better. The other thing is, it used to be if you're doing things in silos, I think some carriers have to choose. Well, do we want to operate efficiently and cost effectively, or do we want to ride and run safely, right? And maybe you have to sacrifice one for the other. The things we're doing is making sure that we combine those things so that they can look at both aspects. How do we ride safely and efficiently and financially, responsible, but let's not sacrifice the safety of our driver. Let's not sacrifice, not being compliant. And that all, you can get there a lot easier with technology that's threaded together and thoughtful and, built in the same stack versus trying to attack it separately.
Well, it's got to be easier for drivers as well. Like when I coach to drivers on behaviors, a lot of times they would say, well, you don't know what I've done. You hadn't seen what's going on. And with this data now and the AI, we can actually pull up events, dash cam, telematics. It's got to make it easier for these folks trying to coach and improve their drivers. When before it felt like when I talk with my drivers, it was a really tough sell because they're like, you're just some schmuck in an office. You don't know what I'm going through. And now I feel like I'm a little more educated just looking at it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able, so we say, that's if we can make things much more transparent, not only for the driver, but the driver managers and the safety departments and things, and start really affecting the experience that that driver is going through, we believe it results in much more cooperation between the drivers that are out there every day out in the field doing a hard job, and the people that are in the back office trying to do a meaningful job. If we can give them transparent data that's connected, it makes that conversation a lot easier.
And being in the game in terms of the technology and fleet space for a while, is there something where, especially with these capabilities, are fleets requesting? Is there something like the most popular low hanging fruit? I mean, do you see them normally saying, "Well, I really would love to have that driver scorecard," or maybe I need to start installing dash cams"? What's kind of been the biggest change in your career and experience? Because it does feel like kind of snuck up on me. The past 4 years, it felt really like a paradigm shift in terms of how these folks are treating safety and technology.
Yeah, I think the first catalyst was when the ELD mandate was put in place, right? That everyone was going to have ELDs in the cab. What that led to was, now there's a Trojan horse in the cab that can be positive or it can be negative depending on what that looks like, right? And then drive cam, you hit on. There's a big catalyst of drive cam to really monitor what the behavior is of the driver and those things. But without communications and plans, sometimes that's still too late, right? Uh, Understanding that a driver fell asleep, you know, while that's great to know that, if you're not doing things before that to make sure that doesn't happen, we think that's too late. So that's the reason we're doing things like leveraging the ELD mandate, the fact that there's drive cams, but using those as Trojan horses for our technology to communicate to the driver, give them warnings, connect networks that everyone relies on, whether it's the highway networks where you're getting communicated to in regards to slow traffic and things. We said, well, what if we could extend that right into the cab? So now every driver that's a customer of ours is on that network real time and understands when things are changing, whether it's weather, accidents, low tunnels, whatever it is that can cause risk to the driver. We're proactively delivering that message to our customers. So a lot of interesting things that allows us to do when we're trying to build this market leading solution that's a single version of the truth for compliance and safety.
And when we're looking at this all-in-one dashboard for fleets who have various ELDs and hardwares, it feels like there's like 50 different types of cameras, 50 different like ELDs. Is that a tech side? So it's almost one of those things where you do have to have a platform to be able to wrangle all this, because I can almost imagine an OEM, then you buy an aftermarket camera, an aftermarket ELD, and then you need something else. Is that one of the things, or do you guys go into the hardware, or is the bigger challenge just trying to, connect via everything and then give somebody that dashboard to make sense? Because it does feel like there's like 20 different pieces of information I'd have to deal with now.
Great question and comment. So yeah, so we understood that there's a lot of siloed information or sources of information that the carriers are wrestling with. So we wanted to build our platform to be agnostic in nature, API based, so that we can consume data and say to our customers, that data that you own that's in all these different um, locations and different solutions, we can consume that and layer on top of that the lens of compliance and safety, right? And what our customers are excited about is they can take this data that's dispersed, bring it into one place, and start making decisions holistically without blind spots. So we view a lot of these vendors that some people could say they're competitors. We say no, we're all partnering, trying to do the same things, right? Which is make our roads safer, reduce nuclear verdicts for carriers and things like that. And the only way you do that is really partnering with one another and sharing data with one another, and that's what we do.
Talking about the biggest impact, y'all kind of have a competitive advantage, especially in the tolling system. There, getting your foot in the door, and it's like, we're already using this for the tolls and all the other stuff that's automating. Why not adopt this? What's some of the feedback y'all have gotten from customers as you all have been expanding it? Is there any kind of big aha moment or any big wins that some of these? Let's focus on the smaller fleets, because the large ones are kind of stuck in their ways. They have their own special way. Just ask a FedEx.
Yeah.
Shout out to FedEx. Those guys really are stuck in what they want to do. But when we're talking about small fleets and owner operators, any kind of success stories, feedback?
Yeah, I think what you would hear from our smaller carriers is for the first time they're finding a holistic solution that's been, tested, with the largest of the large carriers, that small carriers, whether it's owner operators or smaller carriers, can leverage just like the big guys do, right? And because of the way we built it, the way we price it, there is no, entry point that we can't reach down to. I feel like they're saying this allows us to really focus on building and growing our business and doing it in a way that's fiscally reasonable and responsible, because we have a partner like Fleetworthy that we can leverage the technology first if we want, or we can leverage technology and services. We can kind of meet them wherever their need is and grow to where they want to grow to. So that's the feedback that I get from our smaller customers. And then our larger customers are saying, hey, it's hard when you get to the size that we were at. Keeping our arms around all these things is like, trying to hug water. It's just very hard to do. So, someone else that can help us with all the tactical work and give us technology to monitor all the strategic data, it's very advantageous for them.
And I'm thinking about, how do you reach small fleets and owner operators? Is there any kind of a specific strategy? Do you kind of lead in with a certain tactic in order to get them onto the platform, or is it something where across all fleets and sizes they're all kind of trying to accomplish that same goal or pain point?
So this backs us back into why we acquired Hall. So the number one is it's got to be a pricing model that the smaller owner operators can actually handle. Right, it has to be economically feasible for them. So that box is checked with Hall. Number two, we've got to give them self-service tools, so that they can onboard very efficiently, effectively, because a lot of times the decision makers are actually driving. So they're an over the road carrier. Our main contacts are driving, right? So they don't have a lot of time for a lot of conference calls and a lot of conversations. It's give us the tools so we can onboard the information and data and run this business like we want. So that's another thing. And then the last one is give them the ability to expand, and as they grow, whether it be via acquisition or they just go out and buy more and more trucks and have to install more and more ELDs and more cameras, Fleetworthy, can you partner with us to make sure we don't lose control of all that data? So that's how we're addressing the all aspects of the market. And so far we've had a lot of positive feedback from both ends of the spectrum when it comes to customer size.
Does it take like a white glove approach? I'll give you an example. I had enough trouble struggling to get my drivers to change their Bluetooth to connect to the ELD hockey puck that was inside a truck. Is that one of the things where, like, for the small fleets, it's kind of a competitive advantage where it's like, look, I know this all sounds scary. Now you suddenly need a dash cam. Now you suddenly need to start paying attention to all this. We got you covered. Is that kind of one of the areas, or are some of these fleets like really tech savvy? What's kind of the state of the game in terms of these customers you're interacting with?
Yeah, I think from a the device and the equipment manufacturers, they're making these devices and equipment easier and easier and easier to deploy and get installed. Where we see a need for white glove and a lot of support is, as these carriers crosswalk to one or two trucks, and now they're trying to hire more drivers. It's, can we have a vendor that can help us with all the pre-hire regulations to hire that person legally and compliantly, and get the drug tests done and do the SPHs and do all the pre-hire work, you know, and do it in a way that's compliant so that I can get that applicant into the cab as fastly as possible, as quickly as possible, and not create more problems because I'm taking shortcuts or I'm not tracking things or I'm not, doing all that's necessary. So, you know, that's where we give smaller carriers a lot of, bench strength that they just didn't have themselves. And then, as you can imagine, as they grow, both on the driver side and the asset side, having a partner that understands the regs can help you with DOT policies and onboarding policies and random drug testing policies and all those things give them a big advantage as they're trying to compete with bigger carriers.
That was my wildest compliance thing I learned was like you have to keep like hard copies of certain things. Sometimes you have to like fax them in. Like I'm assuming for a lot of fleets without the help, they would really struggle. I'd struggle to remember when you have to like redo your DOT med certs, make sure your license is
Right.
good. So that's kind of where we're seeing it, where that compliance aspect is. You all are now with Hall helping them cover all of that additionally, because I had no idea until I talked to a few folks about how much paperwork it is just to have like an extra driver.
Yeah, and the nice thing is if that knowledge is in the technology and we can set it, the driver or the owner can kind of forget it because the product is poking them saying, hey, remember you have to do these things to maintain your compliance. And then in the cab, we're saying things to the driver like, hey, be careful, you're in a high rollover area, you know be careful, right? So we're doing things, almost being a fractional safety director for a lot of customers in a lot of different ways.
And kind of looking ahead, well, we got a little bit of time left. So we've got, between tolling management for, way stations and various tolls, we've got safety, compliance. As you all are building the moat, is there any kind of next steps? What is kind of, is there like a holy grail of moats, or is there just so many different types of things that you're slowly adding and integrating? What are you looking at across the horizon for, next steps? If you
Yeah,
could
I
share.
think one of our biggest things is we want to make sure that a customer that works with us or partners with us across all these different parts of the solutions we have feel like there's a huge advantage to going to one vendor for all these things. So what that means for us is making sure we're unifying our data across all of our solutions so that our customers feel like this is such a good easy experience, right? So a toll customer who crosswalks and says, hey, we need help with asset compliance, realizes, and because you have all of our data on the toll side, this is going to be real easy because you've been monitoring our assets already over here. So now stepping across and getting more assistance around compliance, really easy. Someone who wants to expand to bypass, well, you've been working with us on compliance, which means our CSA scores are better, which means we can take advantage of more bypasses because the law enforcement is saying, wow, you guys run your carrier and your authority so well, we don't need to pull you over. So we want to make sure that there's this very clear crosswalk ease of use effect with our customers, not only on the product but the way that we see their data, the way they see the data. So it's easy for me to say, but we've got a very talented product and development team that are working really hard to make sure that that experience is unified and very very efficient for our customers.
And one of the cool facts was your suite of products reaches around 75% of North American top fleets. I got a little far out question before we finish up. I get to report on autonomy, electric vehicles, but one thing I keep thinking about is they all have to go through scales and tolls. And so you all are kind of pre-positioned and front-loaded that as the nature of trucking changes, various types of trucks, means and modes. As you're building this mode, you automatically have a really good opportunity to take advantage of all of these new upcoming technologies.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And on the infrastructure side, we don't spend a lot of time talking about the fact that legacy drive-wise, we have an infrastructure team that's best in my opinion, best in the industry, working hand in hand with law enforcement and waste station infrastructure and putting technology in there, really with the goal of just making sure vehicles are safe. So you're exactly right. We're kind of on both sides of the equation when it comes to what's going to happen and when things change, but we're excited about our position in the market.
I'm looking forward to it as well, Mike. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. If folks want to learn more about Fleetworthy, check out this new tech, check out the stuff with Hall. What's the best way they can get more information?
Yeah, best is to go to fleetworthy.com. You can get to all of our brands that are part of the Fleetworthy brand from there. I suggest to anyone, if you have a chance to get a demo of our products, I think you'll see that we're doing a lot of exciting things over here at Fleetworthy.
Perfect, Mike. Always a pleasure to catch up. We'll definitely have to talk again soon and see what y'all are cooking up next.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
That's going to be a wrap for this episode. But if you're just joining us, you can catch us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, wherever you can find your podcast. Just look up Loaded and Rolling. While you're at it, sign up for the newsletter. It's Loaded and Rolling. The newsletter goes out every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. That's freightwaves.com/loaded and rolling. Well, that's going to be a wrap for this episode. But don't worry, folks. Got a lot more great stuff coming up every week. And until then, I'll see you next week.